Doma Sports Talk Worldwide with some news from the world of boxing. So y'all know what time it is. You ain't in a rush to get concussed. Now let's talk number one pound for pound, the face of boxing, and things like that. These monikers, they have Canelo Alvarez. You know, sentiment. Canelo Alvarez is definitely one of the best boxers out there, right? And he has a fight coming up on February 27th versus Admiral Yildirim. Now, here and in some areas, people have had things to say about that fight because it's a mandatory fight. And a lot of people, including me, don't think that Admiral Yildirim is deserving of a mandatory fight from the WBC, the World Boxing Council. The World Boxing Council is notorious for favoritism towards Canelo Alvarez, and that's me being generous. It's really blatant. I think it should be investigated by the FBI, to be honest with you, because it's just a lot of things. Might not get into them in this video. I want to keep this short. Bottom line is, Canelo Alvarez is going to fight Admiral Yildirim for a mandatory fight on February 27th. Now, mandatory. Normally, what do we say about mandatory? That means you got to, right? You got to. So Canelo Alvarez has got to fight a guy who just lost his last fight, right? He's got to fight a guy who has already 2 losses, right? He's got to fight a guy who fought a guy with 3 wins and 31 losses just 3 fights ago. The fight after that was 40 wins and 14 losses. That's not what a mandatory challenger should be. Now, to put some more on it, Canelo asked for this fight, right? They bypassed David Benavidez, who should have still been a champion. He just missed weight by his last fight right at the beginning of COVID. They should have gave him a pass for that. Simple. They really should have given him a pass for that and forced Canelo to fight him. Now, Canelo fights for the WBA championship in the 168-pound division versus Caleb Smith. Did very well against Caleb Smith. But the WBC, the title was vacant. They didn't make Canelo fight for it. They just said, hey, you can have it, right, after the WBC win, which shouldn't have been. You're a different sanctioning body. The WBC had nothing to do with that Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Smith fight. So therefore, he has the belt, and his first title defense of course, mandatory is Admiral Yildirim. Now, here's something that you don't see too often. Canelo Alvarez is a 15-1 favorite over Admiral Yildirim, right? 15-1. You don't really see mandatories with somebody got a 15-1, right? And probably if they asked for it. The only one I could probably think of lately is when Gennady Golovkin did the same thing Canelo did here. He asked for Samaretta, his last opponent, to be elevated to the mandatory spot. Now, these guys that are asking for these opponents that we have to, unfortunately, give the title of being weaker opponents or lesser opponents, even though, hey, they're boxers and they're still awesome compared to us. But when you're talking about boxing, the real number boxing, these people, especially when they have these top 10, top 5, and even the very best pound for pound rankings, they can't be calling up the sanctioning bodies asking for easy fights. I don't think there's a mandatory. The fights that are coming up this year, no one's fighting. No one of note is fighting someone where they're a 15-1 favorite. Now, so my point about that, I hope the damn fight flops. You guys understand and know I won't be watching that, right? Because of how it developed in 15-1, and it shouldn't be. Canelo has way too many things. I can list them, but I do all the time, right? This is ridiculous. 15-1 for a mandatory title defense, I think is pretty much close to unprecedented, right? But we'll see. If you can find fights that somebody, the top 5 pound for pound fight, somebody was a 15-1 underdog in a mandatory fight, you let me know. So therefore, you should boycott the damn fight, period. 15-1 odds for Canelo in his next fight, a mandatory fight. What y'all think? Doma Sports Talk Worldwide. And we up out of here, y'all.